Laura, thanks for joining me on the SteadFast Running podcast.
Thanks, Jonathan. Very much looking forward to it and talking a little today.
So, where are you located right now, and what's the running like in that part of the country?
So actually, I'm still transitioning to Baltimore, Maryland, where we'll be based. Currently in Pennsylvania, kind of making the move here in the next week. But I guess, in Baltimore, I've been down there quite a bit over the last month and a half or so since I've been hired. Got a lot of great options in our backyard. Surprisingly, I don't think people think of Baltimore as a running mecca by any means, but you get down there and you get just on the outskirts of the city, and there's a lot of soft surface options, a lot of parks. And I'm finding quite a few gems in the city, which has been great because as I get the team here, I'm very much looking forward to utilizing those and really seeing how it is once we're in action soon.
Nice. Where are you originally from?
Originally from central Pennsylvania. Grew up as a military child, so don't really have a home base per se, but did my high school years in Pennsylvania. My folks are still there, and so I guess I would say I'm a Pennsylvania native.
So, let's go back to the early days. What was it about running that first appealed to you?
Well, it's funny because we moved to Pennsylvania from Japan. And I remember my parents saying, you need to join some sort of club or some sort of sport to really integrate yourself in the community. We'd been living out of the country for 4 years. And so I was kind of looking for, hey, what can I do to make some friends and integrate myself? And I ended up starting in field hockey, believe it or not, and realized that Pennsylvania is pretty good in field hockey, and our high school at the time was very good. So they had 60 girls trying out for 20 spots, and needless to say, I did not make the cut. And so I actually had the cross country coach who was just recruiting about anybody that he could reach out and was like, hey, do you want to try this? I said, I'll give it a go. And believe me, the first month or two of cross country wasn't glorious by any means, and I really didn't like it, but I kept grinding and kept thinking it might get better, and really loved my teammates and just the running community that cross country brought, and sure enough stuck with it and really fell in love with it. And it was something I couldn't give up from ninth grade year.
We're skimming over a lot of years here, but when you look back at your competitive running career, what factors played a role in your success?
I would say my coaches, my teammates, having a great support network. For me, running was it was a lot more than just the workouts themselves. It was what I was surrounded by. Was I happy? And I think that ultimately contributed to me getting the opportunity to run on a full scholarship at Division I level, and then ultimately take it to the next level and run professionally for a few years. And all around that, I think back to the support network I had and people believing in me. And I felt like that belief was so powerful in me believing in myself to meet the goals that I had and accomplish them ultimately. And so when I think about, what is that one factor, I would say the support network is huge.
What are some of the fondest memories looking back on races, training runs, and teammates, and the people that were part of your life back then? What comes to mind when you reflect on that?
Gosh, a lot of things. What's really cool about running is it's a sport that you get to do it with people. And I know at the college level, like we had so many great conversations on runs. And I think some of the things that stick out to me are just some dirt road runs in Nebraska where our coach is driving 5 miles ahead and we don't have GPSs at this time. And we're like, where is he? Where is he? But just little things like that. And I'd also say when our team at Nebraska qualified for nationals for the first time, that was really big. And I'll always remember that. And so there's little things along the way that, I would always remember, but I'd say like, there's a lot of things.
Yeah, of course. You've done so much, you've accomplished so much. And I know us runners, we tend to be modest when it comes to talking about our own PRs and things like that, but I'm going to try to drag it out of you. So tell our audience, because I know just how fast you've run, but what are some of your best races, best PBs, things of that nature?
Yeah, so I was mostly a 10,000 meter runner in college. So we'll go back a little further. So in high school, my freshman year, I ran 5:09 the miles. So I knew I was going to be a runner. And by the end of high school years, I had run 5:01, 10:24 for 3,200. And also I'd run 16:43. And I was second at the time, New Bounce Nationals as a high schooler. And then I went on to Nebraska and didn't think I was gonna be a 10,000 meter runner, but sure enough, my coach really believed that I was gonna be. Tried out my freshman year, ended up running 33:59 in my first race. So I have a PB of 33:26 in the 10K, in the 5K, 16:17. And then moving on later, I ended up I only did 2 half marathons, but I did run 1:16 as my best. Never did a marathon though. And I wouldn't call myself a miler by any means. I ran 4:51, but I did it a few times and I always love the longer stuff. So the few times I did, I would say that PB sits lower on my list and I won't really talk about that one.
And you ran professionally for the New England distance team, correct? And you had some training partners there that I think are household names. Would you like to comment about that experience?
Of course. Yeah. So I was coaching at Shippensburg University when our coach at the time, I was still kind of running at a high level and I was coaching alongside him. He reached out to me that he had been contacted by New England Distance and they were just starting up. And the president of the group, his name is Nick Haber, reached out and I went up there, visited, and learned that my coach was going to be Kurt Bettinger, who's Molly Huddle's husband. And that was pretty exciting to me. And also he'd be working with Bob Rothenberger, who at the time was the Brown University coach. And so I was really excited about that. Went up there. I went up there also with one of my teammates who ran there quite a bit longer than me. But through that, we got to train with Molly. Amy Craig was there quite a bit, and then Kim Smith as well. And then also we had appearances from Emily Sisson. She was at Providence at the time, but when she finished her time there, she also joined in and kind of did some workouts and easy runs with us. So yeah, a good crew when you kind of look back, some big household names for sure. But I did my 2 years there, and when my contract had run up, it was time to get back into coaching because I really loved it.
Wow, so cool. Yeah, those names, and Lara Rogers was among them.
Thank you. At the time, Lara Crawford, before I was married, but yes, I know a lot of people are like, were you formerly Lara Crawford? I'm like, yes, in the previous days.
Yes, true. Okay. So then from the moment your pro contract ended, how did your relationship to running change and how much do you still run these days?
That's a great question. So my relationship with running didn't change right when my contract ended. I was still pursuing it at a high level, I would say. I just knew I really wanted to coach and I needed an income as well. Because it was mostly a mutual decision to end the contract, but ultimately I was like, coaching is really where my passion lies. So my first year I actually got right into Cincinnati at that point. I ran quite a bit. I mean, I was still running 70, 80 miles a week, thinking I could do it. But I realized quickly that that was really hard with coaching full time at the collegiate level. And so slowly it kind of dwindled. And I would say there's never one moment where it just changed. But as I like invested more of my time in coaching, it just became very secondary. And then I'd say 2 years down the road into coaching, I stopped racing. I actually haven't raced in probably going on 5 years now. Not even in like a fun turkey trot or anything, but I still really enjoy running. I do it pretty regularly. I actually was on like a streak last year where I ran almost 365 days, didn't quite make it there, got sick, but I still obviously enjoy it. Now I just do it for sanity and for fitness. And I'd say on average, 5-6 days a week, I'm running anywhere between 4 and 8 miles. And when I was coaching at the college level, one of my goals was to be able to at least hop in one run a week with them. And so for me, I was like, all right, I got to get out the door, because to be able to keep up with these women, like I got to do something. And so I would usually do their long run with them. And so that was kind of a motivation for me now, is like, hey, can I do at least one run a week with my athletes?
That's awesome. So running is still very much a part of your life, but it's more for fun and fitness and to be able to run with your athletes every now and then. It's funny because I coach and I still run, but I can't see myself running without also having a race on the calendar. So I mean, I know everybody's different, and I never reached the levels that you did. Although I find that I just keep getting slower as I age.
Imagine that. Well, that's just like my husband. His only motivation to run is to have a race on the calendar. And he just enjoys running. He's not by any means a big competitive runner, but he has to have a little race on the calendar to be able to get out the door.
Yeah. Well, so coaching has been your main focus for quite some time now. I always like to ask coaches this very philosophical question. What do you think is the roots or essence of coaching? If you were to define the essence of good coaching, what do you think that would sound like?
I would say it's a partnership. It's figuring out what the athlete's needs are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. And with the partnership, being able to both communicate freely with each other, being able to solve problems and adapting to change, and learning from your mistakes and growing from them. Because at the end of the day, like, coaches are humans and we make mistakes and athletes make mistakes. And as long as we're learning from them and growing, that's one of the biggest things.
That's very well said. I like how you use the word partnership and communication, all those being key words. So then what mistakes have you made, and consequently lessons that you've learned as a coach that you would want to pass along to others, perhaps especially to young female coaches, but really to anyone, myself included, who seeks better qualifications, better opportunities, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was a younger coach, I actually made quite a few mistakes, and I have no problem admitting that. Like, I'd say when I first got into coaching, like, I came from an exercise science background. And so for me, like, the physiological side of coaching was huge. And so I had this, one philosophy of like, hey, this is how you do it scientifically. But I really kind of left out the art of coaching, and I'd say that was one big mistake I made, not realizing like the effect that a person's life in general can have on their performance and their recovery, and making sure that we were taking in those factors in our training. And so through 3 years of coaching, I realized like getting to know the athlete and, their background, what their lifestyle is like, plays a huge factor into, what you can do with them as a coach from a scientific standpoint, and also, what's their ceiling as well. And so I'd say the biggest thing, that I've learned is just the art of coaching. And it's a big factor. I think there's a formula to obviously having a plan and the science of it, but also realizing like, hey, this person is very different than this person because of their lifestyle or talent level. I mean, you can't coach talent at the end of the day, but you can coach somebody based on, hey, their academic load is 20 credit hours versus this person's academic load is 12 credit hours. Like, how much can they really handle? And I've learned that over time.
Exactly. Yeah, we coach people. And I think as a college coach, it differs from professional coaching. So maybe you can tell us what it's like on both sides of the coin. But do you allow that for that communication, that getting to know an athlete, that bonding to be more organic in nature, or are you more intentional about it? Are you seeking those conversations? Are you reaching out to athletes? Do you have like an open door policy? So if a coach really wants to connect better with their athletes, do they have to plan for that in your experience, or is it just something that happens?
That's a great question. I would say I've found it's more intentional than organic. With some athletes, it's organic. Like they want to have that relationship, they want to communicate. But coaching many college athletes, I have found there's some you really have to pull from, and kind of get the curtain drawn, so that intentionally comes from me being open with them. And when I started every season at the college level, all my newbies, I'd have a conversation with them and like, hey, open door policy, communication is my number one like philosophy or stack in my coaching. Like I want this to be a partnership, and yes, I'm going to give you the workouts, but if at the end of the day this is not working and you're unhappy or this happened in your life, talk to me about it and we're going to change what we need to change. We're going to make sure we have that relationship. And I would say that, talking to many of my athletes and having end of the year meetings with them, like that's maybe one of the things they've appreciated the most is being able to communicate. And I'm more of a guider than I am like, per se a dictator, and that comes with that relational side, but it is intentional at the end of the day. So to answer your question, like there's very few athletes I have found that it's completely organic.
Yeah, it depends on the athlete. You're absolutely right. Professional development for coaches, when you think about education and with your sports science background, that's probably one of your strengths really as a coach. But what are some of the steps, even after that degree, that advanced degree that you attained, that you took to continue to stay at the top of your game?
Yeah, I think continuing education, it's being a sponge for knowledge, reading, I love a good phone call with a mentor. And I have had some great mentors in the sport. My college coach at Shippensburg, who helped me with my first coaching job, Coach Spence. Also the USATF and the USTF CCCA classes and clinics have been instrumental for me. I felt like I gained a lot of coaching knowledge from some of those classes that I've taken over the years. And with that, I've networked a lot. They have been great. And I remember going to the NCAA Women's Coaches Academy back in like 2016 in Denver. And it was not just track and field coaches, it was coaches of all level, college, professional, high school, different sports. And they paired us up with somebody, and I got paired with Megan Smith Lyon, and she's the head women's softball coach at Marshall University. And like we still write each other's snail mail and like talk, and we can just organically like talk about coaching in general. Yeah, she's coaching softball and I'm over here coaching distance running, but like at the end of the day, that education piece of just being a coach like coincides with other coaches. And so I would say like, being a sponge for knowledge, really utilizing your network and your mentors and not being afraid to take a leap of faith and take some classes and take some clinics and reach out to people. I know that I've always asked younger female coaches, like, hey, like, don't ever be scared to reach out if you need something, because I've had such great mentors that have done that for me. And I have no problem calling up Rita Gary at Furman and being like, hey, this is going on. And she's one of the ones who is great in helping me get this job, so it kind of works two ways there.
Yeah, since you mentioned Rita, why don't we talk about your mentors and especially Rita? What has she meant to you and in your career?
Yeah, I've had some great mentors. Well, Rita, it's funny because I met Rita a couple years ago, but she has been like, just at meets, we would meet up, have coffee, we'd go out at night together, and she's just been a really great sounding board for me, having been coaching for quite a bit longer and having been a head coach and coaching women for a while. And I owe her a huge thanks, because when the conversation came up with my current role at Under Armour, they reached out to her and she put my name in the hat. And sure enough, I feel like to this day, like, she's the reason that I was able to even, get in on this. And then I'd say Rhonda Riley, formerly at Duke, in Vanderbilt, like, she has been so instrumental. And she started the female coaching mentorship program with Angelina Ramos and a couple other women. And I've been a part of that, being able to be a mentee and then being able to be a mentor the last few years, where I've been able to assist and work with younger female coaches, and helping them grow in the sport. And, that started with Rhonda. And she also has been another huge person in helping me with some roles that I applied for in the last few years, and being kind of that sounding board and that voice for females in coaching. And I think she kind of, when you think of women in track and field, like, Rhonda comes kind of to the forefront for a lot of women.
Yeah, it's so important to have a sounding board and people that will support you through thick and thin. And so through Rita, like you mentioned, she was a big part of you getting this opportunity to coach professionally with Under Armour. So let's talk about that group. You're coaching now alongside Corey Leslie, right? You're coaching the women's group based in Baltimore. So first of all, congratulations on that. And second, what is your vision for that group, and what pieces have already started to come together?
Yeah, so what's been unique about this whole opportunity, it's been about 2 months now that I've been working with them, is that it's a new group on the women's side. It's a brand new group. And when I started at Cincinnati, it was like the challenge of getting that team from bottom of the conference to being competitive in the conference. And for me, it's like so exciting to take something from ground level and build it. And so the vision that I have for this group is, we're bringing in women that have that same goal in mind. Like, we can build from here to here, and they want to be a part of that challenge. And so right now, recruiting is a big thing. We've added 2 women to the group that will be moving here in the next week and 2 weeks or so. And then we're hoping to add an additional 2 or so in the next few weeks. And we have a lot of great women kind of in the running. And so right now, big goal is getting the right people there. And that's not just, performance and talent wise, but also, fit and culturally. Like, we want to have a group that finds a lot of happiness and success by training with others and really creating that team feel. And coming from the college level, that's what I know and I love. And so bringing those right people, and then ultimately, it's going to take time to build it, but we want to make Under Armour a name brand. It's newer to the industry. Like, they actually didn't form their first running shoe till 2009, and their really first true running shoe that people run in 2015. And so we're newer to the market, and now we're competing with other brands. And I think in the coming years, we're going to be growing quite a bit. And so with that, like, our goals are to make teams. We want to make world teams. We want to make Olympic teams, and we want to put our name on the map, and we always say, like, in 5-10 years, we want to be like, our name's up there with the OACs and the BTCs, and the New Balance Bostons. Like, we want to be there, and we know it's going to take time, but I think at the end of the day, like, that's what we're really excited about, is that challenge as well of growing that and being patient through the process. And that's what also has been so great about Under Armour, is one of their things I asked when I was getting interviewed for the position was like, what is kind of your long-term goal for the group, short-term goals? And they're like, we're in this together, and this is going to be a long-term thing. And we know that there's going to be some things the first year or two that we have to kink out and work through, but they're really in it for the athletes and really in there to support us. And really excited to be a part of it and to see where it goes.
Yeah, it's noticeable that Under Armour is making some big moves on the distance running scene within the last few years, I think, or even more. I just interviewed Jacob Thompson, who is an elite runner out in Flagstaff with Under Armour on that coast, or that side of the United States. So is the idea to have a group in Baltimore because Under Armour is planning to build a state-of-the-art facility there?
That is part of it, yes. So our global headquarters are actually based in Baltimore. And so the whole idea behind starting this group up was being right there with the global headquarters and working with our whole network to support our athletes. So, just the last few weeks, I've been down to some of the men's practices, and, we have innovation testing happening at our back door. They're bringing the newest kits out and the newest, shoes out for us to try. And they really want our feedback. And so we're kind of right there to be able to do that. But then the new performance center is a big part of also the startup of this. So we will be anticipating opening our track in October of this fall, and then having kind of our major grand opening in the spring. And so with that, they wanted to start the group up. And then along with that, we're also moving our 800 group up to Baltimore from DC. So they're formerly the district track club. But we're all under the umbrella now of Mission Run. So Mission Run 800 with Mission Run Baltimore Distance. And then we have our Mission Run Dark Sky team out in Flagstaff.
Awesome. Okay. And will this group that you're coaching be focused exclusively on the track, or will you also have some road runners, marathoners as well?
The goal right now is lying on the track. We'll have a few people that might race on the roads occasionally. But our primary focus is going to be 15 people, 5-10. And down the road, we might get some marathoners, but right now our focus is mainly on that core distance I mentioned.
All right. So then you kind of already started answering this question, but let's see where this goes. As a coach, when you're thinking about who would be a good fit for the team and what it takes these days to be competitive at 1500 meters, for example, do you think you need to be an NCAA champion like Sinclair Johnson in order to make an impact on the next level? And if not, which I don't think it's necessary, but if not, how do you take that person out of college who might be a 407, on the female side, a 407 1500 meter runner, and help them make an Olympic team?
It's a great question. Yeah, I would say first off, no, you don't have to be an NCAA champion to make it, I think, at the next level. There's a lot of hidden talent. And also, coming from a mid-major school, there's a lot of kids that are underdeveloped in mid-majors, and they maybe didn't get the opportunity to show what they really are capable of, maybe whether that's funding, at the school to get out to races or having those opportunities. But I would say, to get them to that next level, kind of talking on training philosophy, it's really, getting an athlete to believe in you in the process. And I feel like with that, it's a powerful thing. If you can get them to believe in themselves. Again, you can't coach talent. So if you have an athlete that's talented and you can get them to believe in yourself, in themselves and the process, you got a powerful thing there to work with. And from there, establishing goals and working backward from that. And, for me, that's general to specific. And we're going to work every system throughout each macro cycle, but the emphasis is going to change. And so I'm very individualized in this, and what works, for one person isn't going to work for another. But we're going to make sure that we're, number one, looking at what are the goals that we have and working backward from those key races to develop a plan. And if they can buy in and believe in themselves, and ultimately, I always say take care of themselves as well, we'll be in a pretty good spot to hopefully take the steps to reach the goal. And at the end of the day, you have to be very patient, because it's not an overnight thing. We all know, like, success doesn't happen overnight. And going into some mistakes I've seen is, like, a lot of people believe, I want instant results. And if you can truly be patient with that process, you can start to see the results that you're looking for.
I love how even at the collegiate or elite level, it's still about the basics, right? Form goals and work hard and be patient and trust in the process. All that still applies to the best in the country. And you're right, sometimes there's hidden talent because maybe that runner was injured throughout college. Maybe they didn't receive the best training during that time. So you have a chance to do your best with that individual. So then this is a perfect segue to talk about training. What is a training theme, or let's stick with just one training theme to start out with that you have strong convictions about, or that you like talking about, or that you feel you have good command over, some level of expertise in, or that you just are drawn to within sports science research?
Yeah, I think, again, coming from an exercise science background, like, I've learned a lot about the different systems, and we're working aerobic power, aerobic capacity, special endurance, speed development. And I wouldn't ever say that there's like one pillar that I'm like an expert in, or that I feel we need a lot of, because I've coached 800 meter runners, I've coached 10,000 meter runners. I was a 10K runner. And I think still to this day, like, we're all learning, like, what is the formula? But I think finding that formula for each athlete is the key. And what does that look like? That's like my pillar. It's like, what is that formula for this individual athlete? And I think that takes some time, and that takes looking at their history. And, at this level, it's talking with their college coach. And, what did they do? Were they an 80-mile-a-week girl? Or were they a 40-mile-a-week girl that did a lot of cross training, And then looking at, where do they want to go? What are their weaknesses and what are their strengths? And we're going to capitalize on their strengths. And then with the weaknesses, we're going to find a way to get better and work on those, while ultimately the biggest thing, staying healthy and being able to stay consistent. Because I would say if there's one thing that I believe can really get you that next level, is being consistent in your training, but in your daily habits. And if we can't stay healthy because our formula is off, then we're never going to establish that consistency that's going to lead to the next level. So you want one word, I would say consistency, and staying healthy as well.
Yeah, consistency, staying healthy, and individualization of training, response to training, working with an athlete's strengths and or weaknesses, fitting the training to the athlete, not the other way around. All excellent points. So then, what are other cornerstones or main pillars? And I know that you're thinking of these things now just off the top of your head, but does anything else come to mind that could be universally applied to, maybe someone's listening that that wants to take their running to the next level? And what's one key actionable piece of advice that you would give them?
I would say communication, with the person that's helping you is big, but being flexible, being flexible is huge. Like, we can establish a plan, and you can have a plan or vision for yourself, or your coach can have for you. And, if it goes off script a little bit, and we stay on script because we feel like we have to stay on script, then that's usually when we start to see problems, whether that's injury issues or, anything. And so I would say being flexible with the process, and also just being patient. And I know I mentioned that earlier, but for the average Joe and for every runner out there, like, if you can really trust that it takes time and it's not something that you're going to see results instantly, like, you'll see those little steps over time with staying healthy and staying flexible to reach ultimately the goals that you have. But I've never been a coach that is like, I strongly believe in like a high mileage program, or I strongly believe in a very intense, speed oriented program. I've always been a coach that's the individualization and just having that partnership and really figuring out that formula has been key in the successes that I've seen.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on something you said just now about when training goes off script, because I think as coaches, we deal with a lot of highly driven type A personalities who, if they miss a workout or if they have to take a few days off, which is the wise thing to do in their circumstances, and we're encouraging them to do that. But I think some of them start to feel like they're letting you down as the coach, or like they have failed somehow, or doubt starts to creep in to their head that maybe they're not going to be ready in time for that upcoming race. So now you have to put your psychologist hat on, right? So how do you talk to athletes when they're in that state of anxiety?
It's hard. It's hard. Won't deny it. We have a lot of distance runners are kind of that type A personality, and through experience, like, I wouldn't say there's one thing that you can say to somebody or it's going to change what they think. And again, it goes back to how one person responds to what you say or how you come, at them per se, versus another, right? I would just say that one of the biggest things is just reminding them of that it takes time, and reminding them that it's a process. And yes, like, it's okay at the end of the day. Like, maybe we didn't plan to miss this day, or we have, a little tightness in our calf and we decide that we're not going to do the workout that day and we're going to push it. Like, I think as runners grow and they're more experienced, they realize that that's important, listening to their body. But yes, there's always that piece in their head that I think is like, oh, I missed that. Like, I'm behind my competitors. But at the end of the day, it's having that, that partnership, going back and them feeling like they can come to you and be like, yeah, I'm really like freaking out about this, and reminding them that consistency over years is really what gets the results that we're looking for. And so just being that sounding board for them as well, I found, especially at the college level, just open door policy where they can come in if they're, really upset about something, and we can talk through it. And so hopefully, I would think make it feel a little better, but you never know.
Yeah. And you're holding their hand the whole time. And that's where the power of the relationship really matters. So then, Lara, if you were to compare the training that your coaches prescribed for you and compared to how you prescribe and analyze training yourself right now, what would stand out? What would be maybe some of the similarities or differences?
Yeah, I would say starting with some of the similarities would be that, I mean, we're working over a plan that's emphasizing, our aerobic power, our aerobic capacity, pretty much all the phases. That's something that Coach Spence at Shippensburg, made sure he was working through all the physiological systems that we need to. I'd say that is similar. One thing I'd say is different is that, I was trained myself as a 10K runner, and a lot of the work I did was like heavy aerobic threshold, aerobic power, aerobic capacity. I feel like I never really did a whole lot of like true speed development or speed endurance and things that I think that I could have as an athlete done a little better with. But now I've realized, like, as I've coached a lot of 800-meter runners and 1500-meter runners, like how different that is, and how the percentage of aerobic contribution for an 800 runner is significantly different than for a 10K or 5K runner. So for me, it's really finding that balance and tweaking that for each person. And like, I can tell, like, this past year, having one of my athletes at Cincinnati, like, she's always, and she happens to be one of the ones joining me at Under Armour as well. She was a woman that joined us from Fresno State, and like, her aerobic capabilities were pretty bad. She'll admit it too. When she came, like, she could not do a tempo run. She could not do like anything threshold-ish. It was like 200s all day, 400, 150 she was good at. So we started working on that, and over time, like, it got significantly better. And it took time for her, but here we are, like 3 years later, and a lot of people are like, what did she do in the last year that changed? I'm like, well, we just worked on her weaknesses and we capitalized on her strengths. Like, she could go out now and do, a 5-mile tempo run, 540 pace, and is no problem, and you ask her to do 120s, 150s on the track, like, she's rocking and rolling, and so we're working all the systems. And I'd say, like, different, like, from me as a athlete, and what I've learned is, like, you got to really, like, look at those strengths, look at those weaknesses, and figure out what can you do to tweak that, again, capitalize on your strengths, but the weakness is, like, what is it you can do to help you become a more well-rounded athlete, and ultimately the best athlete you can be.
Yeah, I love where this is going. So let's deconstruct this a bit more, because I think distance runners, especially those listening to this podcast, are probably very familiar with what you would call more aerobic work, right? Their long runs, their tempo runs, lactate thresholds, right there, right near their maximal lactate steady state. But perhaps they neglect the speed end of things. So what would you recommend someone start to incorporate? And by that, I mean, like, specific examples of a workout on the track, let's say, that would help tap into a different energy system, the more anaerobic glycolysis side of things.
Yeah, I would say I'm always a big believer in starting with, like, speed development. And so that can look different. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, they say. But 10-meter acceleration is really developing economy first. If we truly haven't done anything fast, economy is most important, number one. So 10-meter accelerations, 20-meter accelerations. I always like utilizing a hill, less injury risk involved there. So we might be doing 8-second hills, 10-second hills. So 6 to 8 10-second hills on a walk down, just a slow walk down. We're developing power. We're working on running economy, speed development. And then after a couple weeks, we can kind of increase the length on that and say we're getting up to 80 meters, we're getting up to 100 meters, on the track or on the road. And then ultimately we'll be ready to do like 120s. But I never never going to be a coach that would say start doing like 200s or 150s, at your 800-meter effort or 1500. We got to start kind of from the basics and develop that economy first. And then we can kind of get up to doing a session of like 6 by 150 on 4 minutes recovery. And that's going to be at like our 400 effort. And, so for one of my 1500 meters, that might be like 20 seconds or so. Again, that'll be different for everybody, but building from the smaller reps and doing a little less up to longer reps, ultimately up to 200, maybe 250 meters. And then that, over time, developing that.
Got it. Oh, yeah. So start with the true speed development work, like the 30-meter flies, the short hill sprints. And then by the principle of extension, those sprints become longer and longer. And for the recreational runner out there, that may seem like a different sport, but like you said, it improves your running economy. It could even be beneficial for a marathoner.
I believe so. Like, running economy is so important. And it's hard to change a runner's form. But we can become a little more efficient. And I think everybody can benefit from doing some speed development. And I'll tell you a little story, which I think is funny. I didn't incorporate a lot of that until I got into coaching, like as an athlete myself. And so before I do things with my athletes, like, not only do I do a lot of research on it, but I'll also like sometimes try it out myself. And so I remember going to a football field and just doing basically 6 like 30-meter flies. And like, I will be honest, the next day I was so sore. I was so sore. I barely could get through my run. So you have to be careful, right? So we get a little zealous and excited about new things sometimes, but want to make sure that when we're doing these, like, we're fully recovered and ready to go. So anytime we incorporate new speed development, we want to make sure we're fresh for it. So we're not going out for a long run or going out for even just a regular run, coming back and doing it on the back end, because chances are that we won't get the benefit that we want from it, ultimately the true speed development, but also we could risk injury or overtraining.
Right. So get a good warm up. And I like to tell athletes, don't go 100%, right? Say maybe go 95%, because then if they're really stepping on the gas, they can pull a hamstring, especially if this is a new training stimulus for them. And we haven't spoken about strength training or going to the gym, but real quick, because I know that could be its own episode. Do you believe runners should spend time in the gym lifting heavy?
I do. I think it's instrumental, especially in the events that I'll be coaching, like 1500, 800, 1500, up to 10K. I've never coached a marathoner. I've written a few plans for some of my alumni, but I think it's instrumental for distances 10K down. Injury prevention, power, even running economy and efficiency.
So without getting into all the nuances of periodization, which is fun to do, I love that topic, but given our time frame here, let's shorten it to just briefly describing the flow of training as you see it, right? Providing a few examples of workouts, their purpose, the purpose behind them, and where they would fit into the season, beginning, middle, and ends. And let's make the athlete here in question you, since you know your strengths and weaknesses. Let's say you were 25 years old again, you're training for the 10,000. How would you do things differently? I know you said you'd probably add a little bit more speed. So with that framework in mind, walk us through just the basics of periodization there.
Yeah. So, and I'll work kind of like off a college system here, or kind of a fall cross country season and indoor outdoor. So basically over the summer, we're going to be in a general prep phase. And then as the fall starts, and the general prep phase is going to look like basically coming off a break, easing back into what I call just easy running, working on our aerobic endurance. And then after 2 weeks of easy running, we're going to incorporate long runs, strides, And then toward the end of the summer, when we're about generally a month out from our cross country season and getting ready to race, we're going to start incorporating some progression runs, some tempo runs, still including strides in that. And then when we get into the fall, we're going to move into like our specific prep phase, and then and then we'll go pre-comp, and then we'll go competition. And in our specific prep phase, we're transitioning into some VO2 max, aerobic power, and then we're also going to continue to incorporate our long runs in that early phase. And then when we're in pre-competition phase, usually our volume is going to start to come down a little bit. And so for me, it was always about race week. It was usually just a 10% drop kind of in that phase from like current mileage. And then in that phase, we're going to still be heavy on VO2 max, kind of race specific work. And then we're going to be incorporating more speed endurance and special endurance. So I guess an example of maybe a week in the pre-comp phase would be like a 6-5K on 3 minutes. And those would be run for me around like 3:10-ish. And then second workout of the week might be starting out with like a 2-mile tempo and then breaking down into like 6x400 at 1,500 a mile effort. And so that, you know, it'd be like 73 on basically a 2.5 to 3 minute recovery. And then when we're in our competition phase, the long run kind of disappears or dwindles quite a bit. Volume usually is all the way down when we're at the goal race by almost 30%. And really, we're just tuning up at that point. Most of our workouts are really gearing up for racing. And so if the race is a 10K, for me, I'm always going to work a system that's different that week. And so like I've always been a coach, just like if we're racing and we're utilizing a certain system in this event, like we're not going to focus on that system earlier in the week, because then we're essentially training it twice a week. So if we're racing a 10K, like earlier in the week, we're going to maybe be doing 8x400 or 6x400 and 4x200, 1,500, and then 800 effort on the 200. So never again, I never did a lot of speed development, but I think now I would change that as a coach. I would change that for a 10K runner to look like a series of like a cut down. So we'd start at 1,500 effort, getting down to 8 effort, and we do like 2 sets of 6x200 the week of a 10K. And so that'd be like kind of our cross country season. And then I'd say for tracks, I basically will keep going with a 10,000 meter runner, 5K indoor maybe. We're getting rid of the general prep phase because as we're transitioning through seasons, like we don't have that summer base to I guess we don't have time for that. So we transition out of cross country. We take 2 weeks off, or for some of my runners, just a week, kind of reset our bodies mentally and physically. And then we go back to a very short specific prep phase. So that's going to be 2 to 4 weeks, then pre-comp 2 to 4 weeks, and then competitions usually another 4 or so. So again, on the college system, you have 10 to 12 weeks typically in a season. So I kind of break it down like 2 to 3 or 4 in the specific prep, 2 to 4 in the pre-comp, and then like 4 in the competition phase. And we'll do that through indoor if we're trying to hit, like for us, like we had a big emphasis on our indoor conference meet. We really wanted to win titles. And so we kind of hit a small peak there. That was kind of like end of the second competition phase for us. And then going into outdoor, like we basically would take a longer transition into that, and I'd incorporate like a longer specific prep phase. So that's going to be 4 or 5 weeks. And then we're going to go back into pre-comp and competition. And so basically throughout the year, there's kind of 3 peaks at the college level, and I'd go through all the systems except not the general prep phase for indoor and outdoor. So I know it's like a big, long general talk, and I could go into specifics of workouts for each season, but I'll spare you that for now.
No, I would love to hear that, but that's a really great summary. You gave us the annual periodization, the bird's eye view of things. Something that you made me think of when it comes to race pace in the early
Mhm.
season, like right now we're in the middle of the summer, and you said you do a lot of easy running, aerobic type work, some strides. Do you do you think it's important to touch on race pace, like 10K race pace, 5K race pace, if you are micro dosing it? So like if you're having someone do like 200s at 5K pace just to stay in touch with that kind of turnover.
Yes. Again, I was kind of speaking from like what I did, but also now, I guess what I've learned through coaching. That, as I said before, I think it's so important to work all systems throughout the year. Just the emphasis changes. So, like right now, I have athletes. My two women who joined my group, they're not racing for a while. We're kind of going through just the training phase right now, but I mean, I had one of my athletes do 2 sets of 6x200 the other day. Like, we're still working on touching on race specific work. So for her, that's 1500-meter pace. And she texted me after, like, wow, that was really hard. Like, but it's to remind them and also to make sure our body doesn't forget. And while that's not our emphasis right now, like that workout comes once every 10 to 14 days. Um, she's still touching on that, and we're not forgetting what it feels like.
Yeah. And another theme I picked up on while you were describing that periodization was general to specific, right? The specificity of training increasing as the target race approaches. Could you give us maybe one of your favorite race specific confidence building sessions for, let's say, the 10,000 meters?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say key workout kind of for my 10K runners would be like 10 to 15 by 400 on what I call like a 2-minute drill. And so they're going to run that each 400 at 10K pace. And then the recovery is what's left over in that 2 minutes. So that might be like 40 seconds if we're running, say, 33:20. We're running 80s, right? Then they basically run 80 and then they take 40 seconds and they do it again and they do it 10 to 15 times. I think that's a good confidence booster for them to realize that I think we can do this for 25 laps with very minimal recovery.
Right. Yeah. And are you a fan of blended workouts, or maybe that's not the term I'm looking for,
Mm-hmm.
where you're alternating or you're using floats instead of like true recovery in between the repetitions? So like you're recovering, but at a steadier pace.
Yeah, more early in the season, I'm a fan of that. If we're trying to work a certain system. But when we get into more race specific stuff, I'm not really a float recovery kind of person. I'm more of a let's keep active. Let's not sit down or just stand there. But we're not like running at a steady pace. But early in the season, I find that it is great for developing just overall work and kind of especially for like continuing like aerobic capacity and stuff. Like you can get a lot from continual recovery and steady running in between reps.
Yeah, it's a great workout, like Pre's 30-40 drill.
Mm-hmm.
It really teaches you how to use lactate as a fuel. It's lactate dynamics at work. So then, Lara, this is the segment of the show where I ask you, about 10 questions, but rapid fire style, and they're all training related. So you can answer them in one sentence, or if you can go off on one of them if you have a lot to say, no pressure. So let's start with the first one. We have here, what's the biggest mistake that you think runners make with their training in general?
I would say doing too much too soon.
And what's a good race specific session? I already asked you about the 10,000, so I'll ask you for the 1500. What is one of your favorite 1500 meter workouts?
So a go-to for me is anytime we do something fast, we're usually going to do some sort of tempo or up tempo, I call it, prior, or maybe even some VO2 work. So I would do something like 2 to 3 by K at 5K pace, we'd start with, and then we're going to do a 1500 cut down. So we're going to do like 600 meters of 1500 effort, 400, and then we're going to cut down to basically 150, and that's going to be at our 400 effort.
I love that one. Awesome. Okay, and then how do you determine someone's lactate threshold pace? Because when I talk to coaches, we all have different ways of assigning paces, and whether it's we're measuring things in a lab or we're having them run time trials or basing it off races. So what's your philosophy there?
Yeah, I would say it's based on races for me. So taking their 5K pace, and I do utilize the Jack Daniels like book for calculating paces for a lot of my athletes. So, you know, I'll take their 5K effort and kind of go across the chart there. But I would say utilizing the Jack Daniels book and their 5K current race pace.
Okay. Coaching someone to run by feel, where do you begin with that? And maybe what would your cues be? Are you a believer in an effort-based running? Is there ever a time where you tell your runners to go out and leave the watch at home?
Yes, big believer in effort-based running, and I think when I started coaching in Cincinnati, I made sure to go through a session of what does everything mean with them. So like give them the terms of what is a tempo run, what is a recovery run, what's an easy run, you know, and for them, I never assigned paces for a recovery run or an easy run. It was always like the ultimate purpose of a recovery run is to be ready for the session the next day or recover from the session the day before. And so effort-based running is big, and I would do it just very randomly, just kind of throw them off. I would ask them for all their Garmin watches, and then they kind of knew the routes, and they would just go run, you know, a 5-mile route if that's what they had that day, and they come back, and I think it let off a lot of pressure for some of them.
And we know that the bulk of our running should be done at an easy effort, polarized training, or even pyramidal training. Most of it is easy. So how do you define easy for your athletes? Conversational pace, you know, how would you instruct them to run on an easy day?
An easy day would be, yes, conversational. You can joke around with your teammates, and you come back feeling refreshed versus more tired. Okay. So they come back and they're tired. I'm like, I don't think we did it quite properly, or we did too much. Like our recovery or our easy run was too long.
And apart from running itself, what is the next most important element of training in your opinion?
I would say looking at your lifestyle maybe, you know, recovery. So training, I mean, I include recovery in training per se, but when you're training, what you're doing for your recovery is basically creating that formula of stress and rest, you know, to ultimately achieve what you're looking for.
Yeah, you nailed it. I would answer this question with sleep, which is a recovery, essentially.
Part of recovery.
Yeah. Do you think cross training is underutilized? Because I actually program it into my runner schedules, especially during the fundamental block or the early phases of training. But do you think someone can benefit from cross training even if they're not injured?
Yes, greatly. It's a big part of our program. I do think there's a lot of runners not built to pound the ground a lot, and so you can get a lot from, you know, aqua jogging or swimming or ellipticaling or even cycling. And I've used it a ton for flush outs, you know, post workouts or doubles from athletes that are trying to build, you know, endurance or mileage. And I felt that it has really helped keep my athletes' fitness if they're doing it properly when they're maybe a little banged up and we have to get in the pool a little more.
And do you believe in deloading or scheduling a down week within someone's training?
Yes. So again, going off the college level, because I still don't have my woman here quite yet at the pro level, but every third week we would deload. And so, well, 1 week in a cycle of 4. So basically we have 3 weeks on, 3 weeks on, and then a deload week.
Yeah, that's exactly how I do it too. 3 weeks on, 1 week off, or not completely off, but lower volume. So do you teach any specific mental strategies for runners, whether that's like pre-race preparation or even how you attack a difficult training session? There's so many ways we can talk about the mental game.
I wouldn't say that I teach that. I would say that I assist in helping my athletes find what might help them. And so that might be a mantra for some of them, or focusing on chunking, part chunking the race. And so I wouldn't say I've taught it or had, conversations of here's the way we mentally prepare ourselves. It's more so like having those conversations with each athlete on what's their trigger.
And what's something that you've read about within the world of research and exercise physiology that you find interesting?
I mean, I would still say speed development is something that I find a lot of interest in, and I'm seeing a lot more research recently, like saying that it's so important for distance runners. And like, I'd say that's the newest part of my coaching in the last few years that I've really just learned to tweak and figure out how it fits into a training schedule. Because when I first started with it, I thought I kind of mentioned it to you earlier. I thought, oh, we could go do a 4-mile easy run and then do speed development, or we could go do a long run and incorporate strides and that'd be speed development. But now it's like, no, speed development is kind of its own session.
Yeah. So topics like neuromuscular coordination
Correct.
and muscle fiber recruitment
Mm-hmm.
would be something you'd love to read. All right, and then what is your favorite book? It could be, running book, training book, or if it's not a book, maybe a resource that you're checking on a daily basis.
The Science of Running. It's been great. I would also say, just from like a reading standpoint, I love running book, Running with Buffaloes. Love that. I read that in college. But yeah, The Science of Running is a big one. And then I still use the Jack Daniels book for paces. So that's always something that my college coach used and I still enjoy. I wouldn't say I follow the Jack Daniels philosophy, but I enjoy the book.
Great choices. And The Science of Running by Steve Magnus, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
All right. And last one, your favorite runner, race, or moment in athletics history. I'm sure you're a big fan of the sport, so it's going to be very hard to pick one, but.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would say, I don't know. I have to give that a little more thought.
That's hard, isn't it? What does Molly Huddle still have the 10K record?
She does. She does, and Carissa Schweitzer almost got it this summer. I think
That's
she was
the one that
a couple of seconds off. But yes, yeah, you could. Thanks for sharing with me. That helps me narrow it down. But yeah, that was a big moment.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lara, for all these great tips and for sharing your story with us. Our audience, anybody who is a fan of the sport and the people who already love and support and follow you, this was for them, and to honor who you are as a person and what you've accomplished so far in your career. May the best be yet to come.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. It was great talking, and very much look forward to connecting with you hopefully in the future. But thanks again.
And so for Coach Lara Rogers, I'm Jonathan Mederos, reminding everyone out there to be grateful for today's run, which wouldn't be possible without your health. Thanks to that, we are free, which to me is what I love about running and how it makes me feel. We are free to enjoy all that running adds to our life. That's it. Thank you, Lara.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.